right, and that will take us to our employee recognition. And we just want to recognize those employees who are celebrating milestone anniversaries with our organization. We have Jesse Langston in Growth Management, Matthew Roden in Emergency Management, Karen Drake in Human Services, Elaine Holman in Human Services, Brian Hawkins in Growth Management, Michael Austin in Public Works, Emmers Presson in the Sheriff's Office, and each of those individuals had 5 years of service. With 10 years of service, we have John Whitley with the Board of Elections, Joanne Jablonski with Community Services, Michael Kennery with the Sheriff's Office, Robin Kirkley with the Sheriff's Office, Mackenzie Lorenz with the Sheriff's Office, Cornelius Sullivan with the Sheriff's Office. With 15 years of service, we have Ellen Reynolds in Human Services, Elisa Siegel in Human Services, Michael Laney in the Sheriff's Office, Brian McCarver in the Sheriff's Office, and Stephen Wilson in the Sheriff's Office. With 20 years of service, we have Ramona Dunphy in Human Services and William Henry in Human Services with 20 years. Retirements, we had Tracy Simpson with 29 years of service, retired out of the Sheriff's Office, and Annette Sullivan, retired with 28 years of services out of Human Services. So of course, again, we hope that if you see these individuals, let them know how much we appreciate all that they do and continue to do and have done for the county. With that, is the heat on?
Because we lost power, the system probably went down. They supposedly have restarted it, but you may be uncomfortable for a few minutes.
Well,
I apologize.
folks, if y'all get as hot as I do, you'll know why. All right, and that'll take us to our public hearing, FY 18-5307 Urbanized Area Grant Application. And we'll open that public hearing. Seeing that no one has signed up to speak, I will close that public hearing. That will take us to item number 5, FY 19-5307 Urbanized Area Grant Application. Again, no one signed up. We'll close that public hearing. That will take us to informal comments. And we have no one signed up to speak. With that, we'll move to additions, deletions, and/or adoption of the agenda. I will ask that we add the proclamation for the National Long-Term Care Residents' Rights Month under the consent agenda as item number 5A. Any other additions? Mr. Simpson?
Yes, Mr.
Or
Chairman.
Rushing, rather?
I'd like to add a discussion of potential library site to do a request to the library board to look at.
All right. Put that under, let me just put that under 23A, and we'll make the appointment 23B. Will that work? Any other additions, deletions, and/or motion to adopt the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, item 22.
All right. Item number
deleted.
22, we are going to pull from the agenda, and we will discuss that at a future meeting. With that, I'll make a motion that we accept the agenda as amended. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, none. That will take us to the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, none. That will take us to item number 20. Under the fire funding model, and it's my understanding Commissioner Jerry Simpson asked to add this item, so Commissioner, we'll turn to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was, I think, a month or so ago that a couple of topics surrounding this came up. I think it's probably been since 2010. I know it when I began in 2010 that this was a topic of discussion, and we realized that the fire fee model was probably unsustainable, and we probably ought to start looking for a different direction in terms of how we were going to fund our volunteer fire departments. We, as a result, the board sort of put it on the shelf for a year or two and let it remain, and those fees did continue to rise up to the level at which they were capped. Then I believe it was about 2016 that we put the stakeholders committee together, Chairman Rushing and myself, or I believe you were at that time, you were chairman, right?
I think so, yeah.
Chairman Rushing and I worked with about a 20-member stakeholder committee, and we discussed there for, I think it was about 6 or 8 months, and we looked at various options for funding. At that time, the board could not come to a consensus, and I think maybe, I know for 1 year, maybe 2 years, that we froze the budgets for the volunteer fire departments, and certainly I know that probably put some inconvenience with regard to many of our volunteer fire departments. I think we're at a point in time where it behooves this board to look again at what those options are and to come to a consensus on how we want to fund fire funding in the future in order to give staff and some consistency, as well as provide those volunteer fire departments an understanding of how they'll be funded in the future. So I simply bring it up to, as we're beginning the budget process early on, so that we can move forward with it. And Ms. Cotto may have some comments with regard to it.
I really have no additional comments other than if it is the board's intent to have a solution set in time for your fiscal year 19 budget, we need to take some action, I said, within the relatively near future as it relates to this, because otherwise, whatever method you use to come up with a determination is going to take some time. And so I think it's fortuitous at this point in time to have this discussion so we know what direction the board wishes for us to go in.
I believe you share with me the option, a potential option is use of a consultant. Would you like to elaborate on that?
Certainly. One of the things that we did do is we reached out to, I think it was either 5 or 6 firms who do different types of fire studies, and we looked at those that primarily do work in North Carolina. We had preliminary discussions with them as to their availability and whether or not they had the expertise in which to do a fire fee analysis and come up with some funding recommendations, and all of them indicated that they could do so. So that is one option the board could consider, is to direct staff to engage a consultant to bring back some alternatives, potentially do some work sessions with you all to get some input, so that we can get some options available to you for consideration.
Vice Chairman?
Yes, I totally agree with Commissioner Simpson and the manager. This is something that needs to be expedited. Actually, I was doing some checking, and we keep referencing the potential municipal districts that Indian Trail and Henry Bridge may try to pull together. However, I think the fee districts are our actual problem. Our tax districts are self-funding within that tax district. I think we're one of 2 counties in the state
That's correct.
that even use a fee district, and the other counties in the process of trying to figure out how to move away from it. I stopped by the tax office on the way in tonight, and what I'd like to ask, if other commissioners agree, I'd like to know what revenue would be generated out of the fee districts if they were, say, a joint tax district, or what they will do, because part of the conversation when you look at a tax district, I own a business. I've got a desk and a computer. I pay a fire tax on it. Every one of my vehicles I pay a fire tax. And the fire fee district is not that way. I'd like to know what kind of revenues would be generated, and if we would have a shortfall before we start this process. And I think the having our computerized model that does our taxes, I don't think this is a big task. But you know, if they take and say, okay, what if our taxes were like our other tax districts, what would that generate? maybe a 5 cent, 6 cent, 7 cent, just kind of tell us what it'd generate.
Is that something that's feasible?
I believe it is.
Okay.
I would just need parameters that the board would want the tax office to run so that we could limit the scope as to what they have to do.
Just run it like they do I'm in Mineral Springs, run it like they do for me.
But when we're talking about the fee districts, what rate what rates should they assume?
That's why I said the 5, 6, 7, just tell us what they would generate. You would know what kind of revenue we're dealing with, whether it's an excess or a shortfall. I think you're gonna have to look at the 12 districts maybe as one, because a couple of them, they couldn't afford the truck just because of the rural aspect that they are. So, just tell us what, what's.
So run it on maybe 3 or 4 different scenarios.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Okay.
Is that acceptable to?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Just want to move us forward.
Yep.
So, if I understand, you're looking at a per penny valuation if we were to put it.
If we, they pay a per penny on the general tax.
So,
But just if you added 5 cent for fire, what would that generate? What would it do at 6 or 6.5? I took some data that Jeff used when they did the stakeholders, and I came up with roughly 6.5, and there's no way I could look at. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that was
That's probably
at 6.5, and I'm paying that now. So it's not excessive compared to what we're doing, but.
So once we have that, then what would the next step be? What would?
Well, we know that a fee district doesn't work, so it's gonna have to be some sort of tax district. How we,
Well, and because you're actually taxing on the motor vehicles, which we don't with the fire fees.
Yeah. and,
That's probably one of the significant changes.
And with that information, would staff be equipped then to take that and come up with a recommendation? Or to Commissioner Simpson's point, is it something that we still need to look at an alternate, maybe a consultant or someone else to present some additional options? And I know staff has gone through this exercise a number of times over the last few years, and clearly we've not come up with anything that just overwhelmed the board. So I don't want you to, I guess, regurgitate the same thing that we've done in the past and think we're gonna get something different out of it.
My opinion is that you would still probably need to retain someone with expertise in fire funding. I mean, you may have that basic information so that you can provide them with some direction or some parameters, but I think there has to be some sort of nexus that is drawn with respect to the benefit versus what we're charging. So I would feel more comfortable that if you all make a decision as to whatever that rate should be, that you have some backup to support that rate.
well, I don't disagree with you, but if we have this done in the next couple of weeks, and we do hire a consultant, they've got more information to give us a better resolution. Instead of waiting and being on their clock while we're going out and getting additional data.
And if it's board direction to do that, we would attempt to have it done before your next meeting.
Would it make sense, though, to go ahead and start the RFP process?
I have no problem with that.
Manager?
Come back at the same time.
Have them run concurrently?
Right.
Okay, we can do that.
All right. Everybody in agreement with that? Do we need to put that in a motion, I'm assuming?
I would appreciate it.
All right.
I will say so moved if that's sufficient. Is that sufficient, Lynn? Okay.
Very good. Any discussion?
Are we also creating that advisory board with the motion?
That's next.
That's a separate issue. Any further discussion on this motion? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, none. All right, that'll take us to item number 21, Public Safety Advisory Board. And Commissioner Simpson, we'll defer to you again.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also, I mentioned the stakeholder committee that we participated in, and one of the things that came out of that stakeholder committee was the discussion of the need for renewed contracts that we had not done with the volunteer fire departments in a number of years. Previously, the county had been operating under a resolution that was written or approved by the county commissioners, and that resolution discussed such things as EMS, volunteer fire service, etc. As a result of our new contract with the emergency medical services and the new contracts with the volunteer fire departments, many of those things that were mentioned in the resolution no longer apply. In addition to that, there was a fire commission that was created to talk about the various and sundry needs of fire departments, how it impacted the communities, et cetera, et cetera. So during the contract process, the fire commission met infrequently, and being the liaison to that group, having not met, I think we're at a point in time where we need to make a decision as a board. Now, I talked to a couple of fire chiefs. I looked at some other information, and I asked staff to put this information together. As a result of our 911 talks, we've had a lot of talks about communications, volunteer fire service. Is there a need for a group that is broader in scope as opposed to just the volunteer fire departments? And so the Public Safety Committee came out of that discussion. It's broader in scope. It involves a lot more people. So are we at a point in time where we would want to tweak this model or go with this model that you have before you and create that Public Service Committee? We have 2 more meetings in November, and then we'll have our first meeting in December, at what time we will appoint commissioner liaisons to those groups. It may be the pleasure of the board. In fact, I wanted to mention, and correct me, Ms. Cotto, if I get these wrong, the RCC and is it DSC, is that correct?
Yes, we have the regional, well, now I won't be able to remember off the top of my head, but we have a regional group that deals with the radio portion that meets quarterly. We have the dispatch steering committee that meets quarterly. And then we have the dispatch, and I'm not going to remember, but we have another dispatch committee that is more of your telecommunicators, folks within your EMS, et cetera, that meet on a monthly basis. So we do have those 3 committees that are presently active right now.
As I understand it, they had not been that active, but
That is
currently
correct.
are.
Yes, sir.
So my point is, with those committees now actively meeting, is it necessary to create this committee, this Public Safety Committee? Do we want to just keep the current fire commission that we have to deal specifically with fire issues? What would be the pleasure of the board?
Yeah, after reading the detail behind that, I like the concept. I find in reading it, I found it more detailed to the 911 concept as opposed to fires much. My personal take, you were absolutely right. Fire Commission did not meet infrequently. They didn't meet at all for almost 2 years. And one of the things I liked in your motion is that it was going to meet every other month or at minimum quarterly. And I think we need to add that to our Fire Commission, but I think Fire Commission has a uniqueness that we need to focus on. I'd like to see the Fire Commission evaluate the budget requests from the volunteer fire departments to make sure they're reasonable, accurate, and bring this recommendation to the county manager. So I think the 2 of them can work. I would like to see the Fire Commission stay, but I would like to see us add a requirement on that they do meet. It's not at the option of the chairman whether they want to meet, but they need to meet regularly and keep up with the changing environment that we have in the county.
Okay. Mr. Rush?
You know, and, you know, with what you're saying with the fire commission, if we do keep the fire commission, especially if we change the funding model where the 12 fire departments are gonna be lumped together, I don't know that would be fair. I don't know it'd be right if the tax districts are gonna split away, and have different tax districts, what kind of representation would be on there, so I don't know. You know, that might be something we need to discuss after we determine what we're gonna do.
I agree. I'd see, one, you need the expertise from some of the fire community, but you also need some business representation to ensure that we're being fiscally responsible with our approach. So, at least, let's try it and see where we go, because I think on your recommendation for the local emergency planning board, you have it lists like the chairman of the fire, or fire chief, the chairman of the Chiefs Association, and a tax district and a fee district represented. And the rest of it is mostly law enforcement. So, and all of them with the 911, it's critical that our 911 center communicate with our communications center. And I can tell you, I've talked to some fire chiefs and I've talked to the sheriff, and we have improved with our communication. They were very complimentary.
Thank you.
And so, but I'd like to make that recommendation as well.
Anything further, or do we have a motion, or?
My view on it is, I don't have an issue with creating another board and leaving the fire board, but if we were to do that, then I think the purpose needs to be modified, because it does include the fire department's budgets. And, you know, for me, realistically, public safety is public safety. And that includes fire, police, and medical. So if we're going to create a public safety board, there's really no, in my view, there's no reason to keep the fire commission. I think it can be incorporated into it and solve the same purpose.
I tend to agree. You know, I think putting it all under the purview of the public safety board makes a lot of sense to me.
Hearing your comments, then I will make the motion that we create the Public Safety Advisory Board based on the draft provided, and that we, I'll leave it at that for this moment.
If I might, just for clarification, Commissioner Simpson, I think we're looking to adopt the concept this evening because this is a draft. I don't know if you all have additional input you would like to provide, but there is some just general cleanup that staff needs to do that we would, if it is your desire, that we would then bring back to you for formal adoption.
I said draft, I mean, I
Yeah.
didn't say it.
Sorry, I apologize.
And also along with that would include, it would be the elimination of the current fire commission as a independent board.
All right, any further discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, that will take us to item 23A. Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During the public hearing process that we've had for rezoning down in the Waxhaw area, we had talked about the potential for a charter school to purchase some of the property. In order to do that, they're going to have to go back through the rezoning process, and I understand that that's been started. Tonight we have with us Aaron Kirkpatrick from Union Day, and the developer Stephen Rosenberg's here with us. It's my understanding that a letter of intent on 20 acres has been done by Union Day, and that there is some interest in maybe Union Day offering that up as a potential library site. So with the library board meeting, I believe this week, would like to just discuss sending them that as a potential site that they can look at and evaluate and decide what they would like to do, what recommendation they would like to make on it. I understand that they make the recommendation. I think they're looking at some sites now. In discussions with Dr. Farr at SPCC, there was some concerns about being able to fund the library as part of SPCC because of the distance between the location they're in now and the location of a sub-campus. She explained to me something about a distance requirement in order to do some funding there. So, you know, that's going to be discussed, I guess, with the library board as well. So anything that goes in, I would just like this site to be evaluated as part of the process.
All right.
So need that in favor of in form of
We'll
motion?
need that in the motion.
Okay, we'd like to make a motion that we ask the library board to consider the property, the Nixon property on Highway 16 in Waxhaw as part of the, as a potential library site.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Mr.
Is,
Hill?
I think 20 acres is what was talked about for the school. Is the library portion, is that a part of that 20 acres, or is that, okay, I'm seeing a nod from Ms. Kirkpatrick. Okay.
In a past study in 2007, off Highway 16 was one of the locations listed as a library site, which this would be right off Highway 16. The county, it controls that property, so it would be a benefit to the county of being able to control the inspections and, you know, we control the zoning, that stuff already. But you know, the benefit, one of the benefits to the library system was being able to merge, use commercial and the library as parking as a entity together, which would also be a benefit here. There'd be a benefit to the community, be a benefit to Waxhaw. Of course, the library board would have to make those determinations as well, but it's going to be, you know, my understanding is Union Day is going to purchase 20 acres, or that's what they're requesting. So if anything was done, it would be from Union Day after the decision was made. But just this, evaluate this as one of the sites that they're considering already.
Mr. Simpson?
The library board should be functioning as an independent entity, and I have reservations with asking them to consider a piece of property. If it was part of their desire to locate there, it would already be within their view. My understanding is, I believe Indian Trail is 6 acres, is that correct?
I believe so.
And
It's a constrained site.
and it's a very tight site at 6 acres, and this is a Western Regional Library. I don't believe that the site is big enough to handle a Western Regional Library. My personal opinion, it's not located in the right location, but my preference would be that if the library board wants to look at it, they can look at it, but I'm not trying to recommend them, and I don't want to recommend to them what they should be looking at and what they should not be looking at. This should be an independent decision on their part to serve all of the residents in Western Union County.
Just for clarification, so I